The Tennessee Titans need to use free agency to make the roster better, but franchise tag news is going to make that more difficult. I'll explain on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, on today's show, we're going to talk about the recent franchise tag news in the NFL and why it hurts the Titans' possibilities in free agency. We'll also do an update on some guys who haven't been franchise tagged yet, which is good news for the Tennessee Titans. Plus, I'll get you guys ready to go for Robert Saleh and Mike Borgonzi's press conferences at the NFL Combine, which I will be attending. Before we dive into all of that, do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. Again, the Combine is this week. Free agency right around the corner. The Titans revealing their new jerseys. The draft in April. If you want to stay as up to date, as informed, and as entertained as a Tennessee Titans fan could possibly be, make sure that you stay locked in with the number one Tennessee Titans podcast in the world, Locked On Titans. But with that being said, again, the franchise tag window is open, and we didn't really hear anything last week other than some rumors, but we got some significant reports this week about some guys who are going to get the franchise tag. And again, it does hurt the Tennessee Titans in free agency. Maybe if not directly, hey, the Titans don't have access to that guy, but what it does to the market, which the Titans will be shopping in. Now, the number one names that we got to talk about are at wide receiver. Something that I have been saying for weeks and weeks, despite the comments on YouTube, on Facebook, go sign George Pickens. Well, George Pickens is not going to be available. I've been saying that for weeks on the show, and we got a report, not even a report, Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones' son, said that they will be franchise tagging George Pickens to keep him with the Dallas Cowboys. They said, we want him here long term. So, again, George Pickens in a vacuum would be a great number one wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans to go out and get. Big-bodied frame, athletic playmaker, would fit with Cam Ward, but he's not available, and the odds of the Tennessee Titans making a trade for George Pickens are astronomically low. I talked about it last few weeks to anybody that would listen. The Titans are not going to go out and trade a high second-round pick, give George Pickens $33 million a year on a contract, and then bring him into the locker room with the personality problems that he's historically had throughout his career. They're just simply not going to do that. They need their draft capital. They need good culture guys in the locker room, as this is a young team with a fresh culture. It just doesn't make any sense. So you could take George Pickens off of the board. The other news that affects the Titans is Alec Pierce, the wide receiver from the Indianapolis Colts. I think Alec Pierce would have been a great fit with Cam Ward for similar reasons as George Pickens. Alec Pierce is kind of a poorer man's version of a guy like George Pickens. He's not quite the athlete that Pickens is, not quite the ball winner that Pickens is, but Alec Pierce is the type of player that I think fits perfectly with what you need around Cam Ward. You need a big-bodied guy with a big catch radius that can go up and win, because Cam Ward is a gunslinger. He's not going to be pinpoint accurate. He's not going to be Tom Brady with the ball placement. That's just not who Cam Ward is. So a guy like Alec Pierce would have been absolutely perfect, but it's already come out that the Indianapolis Colts are looking to get a long-term deal done with Daniel Jones, which we're talking about what hurts and what helps the Titans. In my opinion, that helps the Titans. Sure, go all out and sign Daniel Jones to a big-time extension when he's coming off an Achilles injury. After, people want to talk about how well he played last year and the injury derailing things, but he didn't play all that great in the last couple of games that he was healthy either. So I am more than happy to see the Colts go out and give Daniel Jones a big-time contract. But with that, they're probably going to franchise tag Alec Pierce. They are not going to let Alec Pierce walk out of the building. Now, I've talked about how that could create a domino effect that leads to Michael Pittman Jr. getting released, and that I would love to see Michael Pittman Jr. on the Titans. But nonetheless, Alec Pierce being off the market hurts the Titans, because not only can they not get Alec Pierce, but now no Pickens, no Pierce. That creates more demand for lesser wide receivers. Whereas a guy like Romeo Doubs is probably going to hit free agency. But Romeo Doubs probably a $12 to $14 million player a year, in my opinion. But now, because there's no Pickens, there's no Pierce, it's much more likely that there's more demand for Romeo Doubs. And if there's more demand for Romeo Doubs and less supply of others, that is going to take the price up. Simple economics 101 right there. Econ 101, all right? Demand, supply, price. So that hurts the Titans, because if there were more options on the board, even if the Titans wanted to go get a Romeo Pierce, wanted to go get a Wan'Dale Robinson, if George Pickens and Alec Pierce were on the market, the top bidders would go after them. And that would leave less money for the people underneath them. So now, with those two guys off the board who were the two top options, now whoever the Titans do decide to go out and get, they're going to have to pay more for them. Now, let's be realistic. The Titans have more money than God, as the saying goes right now. They are richer than rich when it comes to NFL salary cap standards. So yes, they can afford to pay the extra price for whoever they go out and get. But it's just not good business. You don't want to overpay too much for these players. You don't want to overpay too much for anything in life, quite honestly. So, to me, is it going to prevent the Titans from getting one of these guys? Are they going to be priced out on somebody who's actually available? No, probably not. But they're still going to have to overpay, and you can't say that that helps the Titans. Now, more news that we got on another player that I also think hurts the Titans is Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts will get the franchise tag from the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I have not been interested in Kyle Pitts. I think he's a rich man's Chigakonkwo. He can't block. He's not a great route runner. He's good in yards after catch situations. He's a bigger guy than Chigakonkwo, more athletic than Chigakonkwo overall. But I was never high on Kyle Pitts and his fit within Brian Daboll's offense. I've been saying that all along. Brian Daboll used traditional tight ends. That's what he wants in his system. Think about Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. And think about Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger in New York. Brian Daboll likes traditional tight ends in his offense. And Kyle Pitts, Chigakonkwo, Isaiah Likely, none of them fit that. But here's the reality. The Titans do need to go out and get a tight end in free agency. And if Kyle Pitts, who is at the top of the market, is off the board, that means that the number 2 tight end, the number 3 tight end, the number 4 tight end, and on down the line are going to be more expensive. Again, the supply and demand price argument. So I never thought the Titans were going to have a chance to get George Pickens. I never thought the Titans were going to have a chance to get Alec Pierce. I never wanted the Titans to go out and get Kyle Pitts. But the fact that all 3 of them are most likely going to get a franchise tag, or at minimum, never hit the free agent market, it does hurt the Tennessee Titans in their chances of getting a good value for a guy that they do ultimately go after. So that's something to monitor. Will there be more franchise tag news? Again, the deadline goes until March the 3rd. That's something to keep our eye on, because there are some guys who have not been franchise tagged yet, and that helps the Tennessee Titans. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Home Chef. As the new year gets going, a lot of people try to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, packed schedules, a million podcasts, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference, and that's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease, and it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule. 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, and quick lunches. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about the guys that have been tagged or will be tagged that actually hurt the Tennessee Titans in free agency. Now we need to talk about the guys who have not been tagged yet, who could help the Tennessee Titans in free agency. And at the end of the show, I'm going to ask you guys what you want me to ask Robert Saleh and Mike Borgonzi at the NFL Combine. But do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. But we still have not got franchise tag news for Trey Hendrickson. And Trey Hendrickson is my #1 target in free agency for the Tennessee Titans. I have talked about it in other shows when we talked about a perfect offseason for the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to talk about Trey Hendrickson again next week when we start our free agency preview series, going position by position through free agency. Want to get a better lay of the land and who's actually going to be available with cut candidates happening and everything like that right now. But Hendrickson hasn't been tagged by the Bengals yet. And I think that there is a real chance that Hendrickson just doesn't get the franchise tag. The Bengals are in a weird spot, okay? They don't want to let Trey Hendrickson leave for nothing. They don't want to let him just walk out the door and walk in free agency and get absolutely nothing back. Yeah, they could get a compensatory pick next offseason out of Trey Hendrickson, but would that satisfy Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, the players on that team who want to go all in and compete for a championship? I don't know. They'll probably not be satisfied if they don't keep Hendrickson around, period. But either way, the further that we get in this process and we don't hear that Trey Hendrickson has been franchise tagged, the better that it is for the Tennessee Titans. Hendrickson would be literally the perfect fit for the Titans at edge. He is the #1 edge rusher on the market, and he could do a multitude of different things with his size, his physicality, but also his speed, and even at his age, able to get off the line of scrimmage, win with his hands, get around offensive tackles. He's physical. Is he the best run defender in the world? No, he isn't. Honestly, talk about a guy like David Bailey in the draft. I think Hendrickson and Bailey could play similar roles in the Tennessee Titans defense. They could be in that Nick Bosa role for the Titans defense, where they are. I'm more concerned about David Bailey, which is why I would rather get Trey Hendrickson and then get Ruben Bain. If they could pair those two edges up together, Hendrickson as the 3-down pure pass rusher on one side in the Nick Bosa role, and then Ruben Bain as your physical edge setter who can kick inside and rush next to Jeffrey Simmons on third downs, that would be a dominant front right there and set up perfectly. But I think Hendrickson, if he hits the market, would immediately become the Tennessee Titans' top target. They would throw everything they had at getting him. And I understand some of you guys say, hey, he's an older guy. He's already 31. Hey, he only played 7 games last year. But what I would counter with is the 2 years before that, he had 17 and a half sacks. One of those seasons, he led the NFL in sacks. He may be 31 years old, but this is still an excellent player. And if we look a little bit deeper and we understand the circumstances in Cincinnati, it's clear that Hendrickson felt like he got disrespected by the organization. He felt like he wasn't valued. He felt like they jerked him around. He felt like they lied to him. So, could he have come back and played more than 7 games last year? I think it's possible. There are people in Cincinnati who say, We think Trey would have been back out on that field if two things. Cincinnati had paid him, and if Joe Burrow wasn't hurt. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really have a problem with that. Because the way that Cincinnati treated Trey Hendrickson after he had 17 and a half sacks in back-to-back years, and their defense is an absolute disgrace, really would rub me the wrong way too. So I can't blame Hendrickson for that. But like we just talked about, it's not just about I want the Titans to go get Trey Hendrickson. It's about him being on the open market, and even if the Titans don't want Trey Hendrickson, and I'm wrong about that, and they would not be interested in him because his age doesn't match the timeline of Cam Ward and the rest of the team and all that, okay. But Hendrickson being on the market, again, pushes other guys down, not only in price, but in availability. So if you want a guy like Odafe Owe, you want a guy like Jalen Phillips, those guys are going to be more available to you because the people who want edge rusher the most are going to be going after Trey Hendrickson. So no matter what happens here, whether the Titans get him or someone else gets him, Trey Hendrickson not getting the tag and leaving Cincinnati for nothing is the best thing that could happen to the Titans if they want to get a high-level edge rusher. Now, some other names here. We talked about Breece Hall yesterday, but Breece Hall, still not franchise tag. Kenneth Walker, report is he's not going to get the franchise tag from the Seattle Seahawks, but we thought that Kyle Pitts wasn't going to get the franchise tag from the Atlanta Falcons. And according to the most recent report from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, he is. So you can never really know until you know. But Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, not getting the franchise tag, again, would be great news for the Tennessee Titans. I think both of those guys would be phenomenal fits for this team. I would love to have Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall. I like Kenneth Walker more than Breece Hall, but Breece Hall has the connection to Robert Saleh from their time with the Jets. Breece Hall is a more versatile player. He's a much better catcher of the football out of the backfield than a guy like Kenneth Walker is. Although I don't think Walker is bad. Kenneth Walker is just as good as Tony Pollard out of the backfield. Their numbers are very comparable in that realm. And Kenneth Walker is a better runner of the football, in my opinion, than Breece Hall. His numbers aren't quite as good as Breece Hall's have been, but we know that Kenneth Walker has been part of a committee where Breece Hall is getting the bulk of the carries for the Jets. But I would be happy with either of them. Now, the thing is, if the Titans are not that interested in either of those running backs, them being on the market makes a guy like Travis Etienne make more or make less. And if Etienne makes less, then a guy like Tyler Algier, a guy like Rachaad White, a guy like Brian Robinson also make less. And that creates more value for the Tennessee Titans because, again, I'm fine with them going out and getting Kenneth Walker, going out and getting Breece Hall and paying top of the market money to go do that. But I'm also perfectly fine with a value veteran like an Algier, like a Brian Robinson, like a Rachaad White who just runs hard downhill. The Titans simply need a power back that runs north and south harder than Tony Pollard does. Tony Pollard runs fine, okay? Tony Pollard's not a bad player. Running backs are a dime a dozen, first and foremost. But if Javonte Williams coming off 1,200 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns is getting $8 million a year, you can't pay Tony Pollard $9.5 million a year for this season. You can't do that. You simply can't. And if Javonte Williams is only getting $8 million APY average per year, then a guy like Algier, a guy like Rachaad White, a guy like Brian Robinson, you might get one of those guys for $4 or $5 million a season. If they were to give Tyler Algier a 2-year, $10 million deal with $7 million guaranteed, I'd be all over that in a second. And that is more possible if Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall actually hit the open market. Again, they could still get tagged. The window is until March the 3rd, which is, basically a week from today. Next Tuesday. But it hasn't happened yet. And conversations are going to happen at the NFL Combine. And if these teams don't see eye to eye with the agents, they don't want to. This is a problem with the Bengals. If you franchise tag these guys, they are on your salary cap for that amount. You can't finagle it with bonus money, signing bonus, void years. It's a 1-year deal worth that amount of money, which means that amount is on the salary cap. And if you're going to have Trey Hendrickson at $27 million or Breece Hall at $15 million on your salary cap during the beginning of free agency, that is going to limit what you're able to do in free agency, and teams don't like that. So hopefully these teams will not tag these guys to keep their free agency flexibility, and then it can help influence the markets in the direction that the Titans would benefit from. So with that being said, though, I'm headed to the Combine again this year, and I'm going to ask some questions to Robert Saleh and Mike Borgonzi, and I want to get your guys' input on what kind of questions you want to hear asked. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in, because not only can your pick cash, but it can also send you to the NBA Finals. And if you guys watch basketball, you know coming out of the break, we are about to go into the best part of the NBA season. So make sure that you visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about the franchise tag news in the NFL, the good and the bad for the Titans. Now, want to cap things off talking about what questions I want to ask Robert Saleh and Mike Borgonzi, what questions you want to hear asked as well. Before we dive in, thanks again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Speaking of every day, you guys need to join the Locked On Titans Everydayer Club. The link to join is down below in the description. I give you guys year-round, every single day, multiple bits of content, whether it's short videos, bonus episodes, full-length episodes as well. Help support the show by joining the Locked On Titans Everydayer Club. Not only do you help support the show, but you get ad-free versions of the podcast directly in your podcast feed. You get added to the Locked On Titans group chat, and you get access to a Locked On Titans merch store. But with all that being said, again, I am going to be heading to the NFL Combine for a second straight season, and I'm very excited to ask some questions to Robert Saleh and Mike Borgonzi. I want to talk about Robert Saleh specifically first, because I do want to ask some player-specific questions to Robert Saleh. For example, how much do your previous connections influence your free agent ones? Now, I'm not going to say specific players because that's where you get in trouble. You can't phrase these questions to where they literally can't. I can't ask directly about Breece Hall or John Franklin Myers or anything like that. But if you put it in a vague way, Robert, how much do you think that your previous connections to players in the NFL could influence free agency decisions? Will you prioritize a guy who you have worked with before and who you know what to expect from over another guy who may be more accessible to the team, but you're not as familiar with? What's your answer to that? Also, very similar vein, how much will your previous draft picks, whether it be when you were the DC in San Francisco or the head coach in New York, influence your suggestions to the front office about what you want going forward? Will you look for similar traits to guys you drafted before? Or would you say that, the front office at those places had more impact than maybe you as the coach? What is the line between the coach making the draft pick and the front office making the draft pick. How do you, as a head coach, bridge that gap of, hey, I think this guy fits, versus maybe the front office saying, we think this guy is more talented, or these guys' traits are similar to a guy that I've coached before, versus the front office thinks this guy is a much better player, but he doesn't have the traits that you're as familiar with. How do you bridge that gap as a coach? What do you hope the front office takes from your suggestions and your mindset? Curious to know what his answer is to that. In the past, he's also said that he's somebody who doesn't care as much about giving up yards. It's all about not giving up points. I'd like to ask him if he still feels that way. Also, what about players that are already on the team? You know, he mentioned Jeffrey Simmons and Cam Ward, of course, at his press conference. Titans, two figureheads, of course. But what about a guy like Femi Oladejo? How do you see his fit? Do you think he's a pure edge, like the edge rushers that Gus Bradley explained? Or do you see him in a Sam linebacker role? What's your view of Femi Oladejo in year two? What about Kevin Winston? Winston's a versatile safety. He has the speed and the range and the length to play in the back end, but he also has the physicality and the burst towards the line of scrimmage to play in that big nickel spot. How do you view Kevin Winston within your defense? T'Vondre Sweat. T'Vondre Sweat's skill set and body type isn't very similar to a lot of the guys you've had on your interior defensive line in your previous stops. Are you going to ask him to do more of what you want? Or are you going to try to craft a role within your defense that fits more who he is? Maybe you don't think that that's a difference at all. You think that T'Vondre Sweat's gifted athleticism, even at his size, will allow him to play interior defensive line the way that maybe smaller, faster, quicker guys who you've worked with in the past have been. Those player-related questions are really what I want to ask of Robert Saleh. Let me know which of those questions you like the most, either on social media, I'm everywhere, or down below in the comments on YouTube. What questions would you ask Robert Saleh if you had the opportunity? If there are any good ones, I'll see if I can get them in. Now, for Mike Borgonzi, Borgonzi's press conference is on Wednesday, so I'm going to head back to the Combine on Wednesday. I want to ask him, especially with it being the Combine, what are some of the key metrics or key thresholds that you have at certain positions? 3-cone for offensive linemen, 40-yard for wide receivers, arm length for edge rushers. You see, you can find things out if you don't ask about specific players. Hey, Mike, how important would you say arm length is to edge rushers in the NFL, knowing that there's never been an edge rusher with under 31-inch arms who's had over 12 sacks in a season? What are your thoughts on arm length as a key metric for edge rushers? I didn't even mention Ruben Bain, but we could figure out Mike Borgonzi's opinion on Ruben Bain by how he answers that question. If he answers, well, I think it's critically important, it's something that we measure, it's something that we're stuck on, we really need guys to hit certain thresholds and certain metrics at certain positions for us to draft them. That might give us our answer of, oh, they're not going to draft Ruben Bain. He's got too short of arms. They're not in. And best believe that there are NFL teams, most NFL teams, that have those key metrics and thresholds. We're not drafting an offensive lineman with a 3-cone that's slower than this. We're not drafting a linebacker with a vertical jump that's lower than this. We're not, but those key metrics exist for all teams. What about player trades? Mike, if you were looking to make trades this offseason, would you be willing to take a player back? Or are you simply looking for draft capital? Are you in the market for a player-for-player swap? Would you attach a player in a draft pick to maybe get a better draft pick? How do you view your options with trades this offseason? Or are you simply looking for draft capital in return to hit those standards that you guys set, 12 picks in the top 100 in the next 3 years? What would be your preference in that regard? Also, what if we get into the nitty-gritty of the roster? What do you think would be the best backup for Cam Ward? you think it would be a veteran or more of a younger guy who can push Cam Ward and be more competitive with him? Will Levis versus veteran backup question, but you don't put their names in it so he can answer it more honestly without directly trashing a certain player or making a statement on a play. Cam's accuracy. It's clear from Cam Ward's rookie tape and from his college tape that Cam may not be the most pinpoint accurate quarterback in terms of his ball placement. In your opinion, do you think that it's Cam's job to be more consistent in his mechanics, to be more pinpoint accurate, or do you as the general manager need to look at certain guys' skill sets and say, hey, big catch radius, big body, good hands catcher, can pluck it out of the air. That fits good and can support my quarterback. How do you view that balance of getting guys on the roster who can support certain weaknesses versus a guy improving his own weaknesses through development? That's a question that I would be interested to ask. What about this one? How much does depth at particular positions in the draft influence how you pick? Would you pass on a more talented guy who you had ranked higher at a certain position to go with another guy at a different position who you have ranked lower if you know that the position you're passing on is deeper? How do you view that philosophically? Because that could give us some real answers about how they see the draft and what they want to do. How do you feel about salary dump trades? Would you be willing to use your salary cap space to take on salary from another team in exchange for a draft pick? Is that something that you would reasonably entertain? The Tua trade, but without Tua's name in it. Those are the types of questions that are on my mind right now. Those are the types of things that I'm going through as, hey, I could potentially ask that question. I'm only going to get one or two. So got to be diligent and, got to be smart about what I pick. But regardless, those are the things that are on my mind and some questions that I would want answers to. Again, let me know your questions for Saleh and Borgonzi down below or hit me up on social media. But that's going to do it for me today, folks. Tomorrow, I'll be coming at you live from the NFL Combine. But as always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.